The champagne had gone flat in Maya's glass an hour ago, but she still held it like a shield as she watched her sister Catherine spin across the dance floor in her cloud of white tulle and lace. The ballroom of the Grand Hartford Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers, and the laughter of 200 guests, who all seemed to know exactly where they belonged in this celebration. Maya stood at the edge of it all, her burgundy bridesmaid dress suddenly feeling too tight around her ribs, watching strangers dance with the easy confidence of people who had never questioned their place in the world. Catherine caught her eye from across the room and mouthed something that looked like, "Come dance," but Maya just smiled and raised her flat champagne in a mock toast. Her sister deserved this perfect day without Maya's melancholy casting shadows on it. Besides, their mother had already cornered her twice about why she was standing alone, and their Aunt Linda had spent 15 minutes introducing her to every single man under 40 at the reception, each conversation more awkward than the last. The DJ transitioned into something slower, and couples paired off naturally as if choreographed. Maya finally set down her glass and slipped toward the less crowded side of the ballroom where tall windows overlooked the hotel gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that matched the wedding colors perfectly. Of course it did. Everything about Catherine's wedding was perfect. Maya closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. Her feet began to move almost without her permission, swaying gently to the rhythm. She had always loved dancing back when she took lessons as a teenager, back before life got complicated and she stopped doing things just for the joy of them. Her hands lifted slightly, and she turned in a small circle, imagining she was anywhere but at her sister's reception, feeling like the only person in the world without a partner. "You dance beautifully," a voice said quietly beside her, and Maya's eyes flew open. The man standing there was tall, with dark hair that was slightly longer on top and warm brown eyes that held no mockery or pity. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he held himself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from never having to prove anything to anyone. Maya had never seen him before in her life. "I didn't mean to startle you," he continued, his voice low and genuine. "I just wondered if you might like some company. I noticed you were dancing alone and I thought perhaps we could dance together instead, quietly. No pressure." Maya's heart did something strange in her chest. His smile was gentle, almost hesitant, as if he expected her to say no. Most men at weddings had a certain aggressive cheerfulness when they approached women, especially after a few drinks. This man seemed different, almost careful with his words. "I don't know you," Maya said, which felt like a stupid thing to say at a wedding where half the guests were strangers to her anyway. "I'm James," he said, extending his hand. "James Thornton. I'm here with the groom's side. My company works with Richard's firm occasionally, and he was kind enough to invite me." Maya shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. "Maya, I'm the bride's sister, the maid of honor," James said with a nod toward her dress. "I saw you during the ceremony. You gave a beautiful toast earlier." She had forgotten about the toast, the carefully written words about love and partnership that had felt hollow in her mouth because she had never experienced either. But James was looking at her like he had actually listened, like the words had meant something. "So," he said, gesturing to the space between them, "would you dance with me, Maya?" There was something in the way he asked, something that made her feel like she could say no and he would simply nod and walk away without any wounded pride or irritation. But she found herself nodding instead, found herself stepping closer as he placed one hand carefully at her waist and took her other hand in his. They began to move together, and Maya was surprised by how easily they fell into rhythm. James was a good dancer, leading with subtle pressure rather than force, giving her room to follow or improvise as the music demanded. They stayed near the windows, away from the crowded center of the dance floor, moving in their own quiet space. "Why were you dancing alone?" James asked after a moment. "At your own sister's wedding." Maya considered lying, giving him some easy answer about needing air or wanting to practice her moves. But something about the fading light and the warmth of his hand, and the fact that she would probably never see him again, made her honest. "I've been at the edge of things all night," she said. "I love my sister, I'm happy for her, but being here just reminds me of everything I don't have. And I know that's selfish and terrible, but watching everyone pair off, watching people find each other so easily, it makes me feel invisible. So I was dancing alone because at least then I was doing something instead of just standing there feeling sorry for myself." James was quiet for a moment, his eyes serious. "That's not selfish. That's human." They turned slowly, and Maya caught a glimpse of Catherine laughing in Richard's arms, both of them glowing with happiness. "She's my little sister," Maya said. "I'm supposed to do everything first, right? But she found her person, and I'm still figuring out how to exist in the world without apologizing for taking up space." "How old are you?" James asked, and Maya bristled slightly before she saw the genuine curiosity in his face. 27. Catherine is 25. "Not a big difference, I know. But when we were kids, I was always the one leading the way. Now I work 60 hours a week at an architectural firm in Boston. I live in an apartment with 2 roommates, and my last relationship ended 8 months ago when he told me I was too focused on my career to ever really commit to someone." The words tumbled out faster than she intended. "Sorry. You asked me to dance, not for my life story." "I don't mind your life story," James said simply. "Architecture, that's impressive. Are you a designer, junior associate?" Maya said. "Mostly I work on residential projects helping people reimagine their spaces. I love it, actually. I love the puzzle of taking what exists and making it better, more beautiful, more functional. I just wish it didn't take every hour of every day." "Sounds like you need a better firm," James said. "Or better boundaries." "Says the man who came to a wedding alone for business networking." Maya shot back, but she was smiling. James laughed, a rich sound that made something warm bloom in her chest. "Fair point. Though for the record, I came alone because I don't currently have anyone to bring, and I stayed because the ceremony was actually beautiful, and now I'm very glad I did because I got to dance with you." Maya felt her cheeks warm. "That's a line." "It's the truth," James said, meeting her eyes. "I've been to 100 weddings, Maya. Most of them blur together. But I'll remember this one because I'll remember dancing with you by these windows while the sun set." They danced through 2 more songs, barely speaking, just moving together in comfortable silence. Maya learned the way James shifted his weight before turning, the steady warmth of his hand at her waist, the way he smelled faintly of cedar and something expensive. She noticed other guests starting to glance their way, curious about the stranger dancing with the maid of honor, but she didn't care. When the music shifted to something faster and louder, they naturally separated, still standing close. "Would you like to get some air?" James asked. "Actually air outside. The gardens looked beautiful when I arrived." Maya knew she should say no. She should return to her duties as maid of honor, should check on Catherine, should make sure the photographer got all the required family shots. But Catherine was radiant and surrounded by friends, and Maya had been the perfect helpful sister all day. She deserved 10 minutes for herself. "Yes," she said. They slipped out through the terrace doors, escaping the noise and heat of the reception. The gardens were lit with small lanterns along the pathways, creating pools of warm light among the shadows. The air was cool and sweet with the scent of jasmine. Maya took a deep breath, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Better?" James asked. "Much." Maya walked slowly down the nearest path, and James fell into step beside her. "So tell me about this company of yours that works with Richard's firm. What do you do?" "Commercial development primarily," James said. "We acquire properties and redevelop them, usually into mixed-use spaces. Retail, office, residential, that kind of thing." "You're a developer," Maya said, and some of her warmth dimmed. She had dealt with developers in her work, and most of them cared more about profit margins than creating beautiful, functional spaces. They were the ones who wanted her to cut corners, to sacrifice design integrity for cheaper materials. James must have caught her tone because he smiled slightly. "I'm not one of the bad ones, I promise. Or at least I try not to be. My philosophy has always been that good design and good business aren't mutually exclusive. Build something beautiful that serves the community well and people will want to be there. That's sustainable success." "That's a nice philosophy," Maya said carefully. "Does it work in practice?" "Most of the time," James said. "I've been lucky. My first major project was a historic building in downtown Chicago that everyone said should be torn down. I spent 2 years and considerably more money than I should have restoring it while adding modern infrastructure. Now it houses local businesses on the ground floor, affordable apartments above, and a community art space in the basement. It's been profitable, but more than that, it's become a real neighborhood hub. That's what I'm proudest of." Maya stopped walking and turned to look at him. "You restored a historic building and included affordable housing and community space. Developers don't do that." "This one does," James said. "Look, I won't pretend to be some kind of saint. I make money, quite a bit of it. But I also believe that if you're going to change a community's landscape, you have a responsibility to change it for the better. My parents raised me to leave things better than I found them." They had reached a small fountain, water trickling quietly over stone. Maya sat on the edge and James sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "How did you get into development?" she asked. "My father was a contractor," James said. "Small operation, mostly home renovations and repairs. I grew up on job sites, learning how buildings came together. When I went to college, I studied business and architecture, and I realized I wanted to work at the intersection of both. I started small, flipping houses, then moved into larger commercial projects. Built the company slowly over the past 10 years. 10 years, Maya said. "How old are you?" 34, James said. "Old enough to have made most of my major mistakes already and young enough to still have time to fix them." Maya laughed. "That's a diplomatic answer." "What about you?" James asked. "Why architecture? When did you know?" Maya trailed her fingers through the fountain water, watching the ripples catch the lantern light. "When I was 8, my parents bought this old house that needed a lot of work. It was dark and cramped and kind of depressing, but I could see what it could be. I drew these elaborate plans for how we could knock down a wall here, add windows there, turn the attic into a reading nook. My dad said I had vision. My mom said I was bossy." She smiled at the memory. "They did some of my suggestions, and watching that house transform was like magic. I knew then that I wanted to do that for real, to help people see the potential in spaces." "Do you get to do that in your current job?" James asked. Maya hesitated. "Sometimes. Mostly I do what I'm told and try to build my portfolio so that someday I can start my own practice and take on the projects I really care about." "What kind of projects are those?" "Affordable housing that doesn't look like affordable housing," Maya said immediately. "Adaptive reuse of old buildings, community centers, libraries, spaces that matter to people who don't have unlimited budgets, Beautiful design shouldn't only be for the wealthy. James was quiet for a long moment, and Maya worried she had offended him. He was clearly wealthy himself, with that suit and that watch and the easy confidence of someone who had never worried about money. But when she looked at him, his expression was thoughtful rather than insulted. "You should do that," he said finally. "You should start your practice now." "It's not that simple," Maya said. "I have student loans, rent, my share of my parents' medical bills from when my dad was sick. I need the steady paycheck." "Your dad was sick?" James asked gently. "Is sick," Maya corrected. "Cancer. He's in remission now, but the bills are still there." Catherine got lucky because she finished school before Dad got diagnosed. I was still in my master's program, so my parents were helping with tuition when everything happened. They told me not to worry about it, but I do. I send money home when I can. "And work 60-hour weeks," James said. "And work 60-hour weeks," Maya agreed. She looked up at the sky where stars were starting to appear. "But this is too heavy for a wedding. Tell me something lighter. What do you do for fun when you're not developing properties?" "I sail," James said. "I have a boat docked in Chicago." "Nothing enormous, but big enough for day trips or overnight stays. There's something about being on the water that makes everything else quiet down. I try to get out at least once a week during the season." "I've never been sailing," Maya said. "Never?" James looked genuinely surprised. "You live in Boston. The harbor is right there." I know. It's on my list of things to do when I have time and money." Maya stood up, suddenly restless. "I should get back inside. Catherine will wonder where I went." James stood too, but he didn't move toward the hotel. "Maya, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Not tonight, obviously, but when you're back in Boston. I'm there fairly often for business." Maya's heart kicked against her ribs. "You're asking me on a date?" "I'm asking if I can see you again," James said. "I don't usually do this. I don't usually meet someone and know within an hour that I want to know everything about them. But here we are, and I'm asking." "You don't know anything about me," Maya said, even though part of her wanted to say yes immediately. "I know you love your sister even when it's complicated. I know you care about creating beautiful spaces for people who need them. I know you dance alone when you think no one is watching, and you're honest about feeling invisible even though you're the opposite. I know you take on your family's burdens without complaint, and you still find joy in your work despite being exhausted." James took a step closer. "I know that I haven't been able to stop watching you since I walked into this reception and saw you standing by yourself with that look on your face like you were trying to disappear. I know I want to keep talking to you." Maya's breath caught. No one had ever looked at her the way James was looking at her right now, like she was the only person in the world worth paying attention to. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Dinner, but just dinner. I'm not good at this, the dating thing. I'm busy and distracted, and I'll probably cancel twice before we actually manage to meet." "Then I'll ask 3 times," James said, smiling. "Fair warning, though, I'm persistent when I want something." They walked back toward the hotel together, and Maya felt like something had shifted in the night. When they reached the terrace doors, Catherine was there, her face flushed and happy. "There you are. I've been looking for you. We're about to cut the cake and I need you there. Who is this?" "James Thornton," James said, shaking Catherine's hand. "Congratulations on your marriage. It's been a beautiful celebration." "Thank you." Catherine looked between them with obvious curiosity. "How do you two know each other?" "We just met," Maya said. "James was kind enough to dance with your lonely sister." "She wasn't lonely," James said. "She was taking a moment." Catherine's eyes lit up with the particular gleam Maya recognized as her matchmaking expression. "Well, James, you should stay for cake, and the bouquet toss." "Maya needs to catch the bouquet." "Catherine," Maya said warningly. "What? You do? Come on, both of you, inside. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of cake and toasts, and Catherine insisting that Maya stand front and center for the bouquet toss. Maya deliberately stood to the side, but Catherine apparently had perfect aim because the flowers sailed directly into Maya's face, and she caught them on reflex. Everyone cheered, and Maya felt her cheeks burn as Catherine winked at her from across the room. She found James again as people started to leave. He was talking to Richard, both of them laughing about something. When he saw Maya approaching, he excused himself and met her halfway. "Looks like you're next," he said, nodding at the bouquet. "Old tradition. Doesn't mean anything." "No." James pulled out his phone. "Then you won't mind if I get your number for that dinner." Maya recited her number, watching as he typed it in. His phone was newer and more expensive than hers, of course. Everything about him spoke of money in a way that should have made her uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. Maybe because he didn't flaunt it, didn't use it to impress. He just existed in his expensive suit like it was as normal as her worn bridesmaid dress. "I'll text you so you have mine," James said, and a moment later Maya's phone buzzed in her small clutch purse. "It was wonderful to meet you, Maya. Thank you for dancing with me." "Thank you for asking," Maya said, and meant it. She watched him leave, then spent the next 2 hours helping Catherine out of her dress and into her honeymoon travel clothes, making sure all the gifts were loaded into the right cars, thanking vendors and guests and family members. By the time she finally collapsed into bed at her hotel room well past midnight, she was exhausted. But she pulled out her phone and looked at the text from James. It was simple. Just his name and a single line. "I meant what I said. I'll remember dancing with you." Maya saved his contact and fell asleep smiling. The next morning, Maya drove back to Boston in her practical sedan with the bridesmaid dress hanging in the back, and a headache from too little sleep and too much champagne. Her apartment was exactly as she had left it, small and cluttered with architecture books and half-finished sketches. Her roommates were both gone for the weekend, so she had the place to herself. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt the loneliness settle over her like a familiar coat. She spent Sunday doing laundry and grocery shopping and preparing for the week ahead. She had a presentation on Tuesday for a potential client, a young couple wanting to renovate their kitchen. It was straightforward work, nothing innovative, but it would look good in her portfolio. She sketched out ideas and refined her pitch, losing herself in the familiar comfort of design. Monday came too quickly. Maya was at her desk by 7 as usual, and her boss dropped a new project on her by 8. The rest of the day disappeared into client calls and design adjustments, and the million small details that went into residential architecture. She didn't think about James or the wedding at all until she was on the subway home, and her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Except it wasn't unknown. It was James. "How was your first day back in the real world? Did you survive the post-wedding blues?" Maya stared at the message, surprised. She had half convinced herself that their conversation had been one of those magical wedding moments that evaporated in daylight, that he wouldn't actually follow up. But here he was, texting her like they were already friends. She typed back, "Survived. Barely." "How did you know I'd have post-wedding blues?" His response came quickly. "Because I watched you at the reception. You felt everything deeply. That kind of person always feels the letdown afterwards." Maya wasn't sure if that was insightful or unsettling. "Are you always this observant?" "Only about things that interest me." They texted back and forth for the next hour, easy conversation about nothing important. James was in Chicago, dealing with a contractor dispute on one of his properties. Maya told him about her kitchen renovation project. He sent her a photo of the Chicago skyline from his office window, all glass and steel and evening light. She sent him a photo of her extremely mediocre leftover pasta dinner. "You need better food," James wrote. "You need lower real estate," Maya shot back. "Touché." They kept texting throughout the week. Good morning messages that turned into all-day conversations. James was funny and thoughtful and genuinely interested in her work. He asked smart questions about her projects and shared stories about his own. Maya learned that he had a younger sister who was a teacher, that his mother had passed away when he was in college, that his father had recently retired and moved to Florida. James learned that Maya was terrified of birds, that she could play piano but refused to perform in front of people, that her favorite building in the world was the Boston Public Library. On Friday afternoon, James called instead of texting. "What are you doing this weekend?" he asked without preamble. "Working, probably," Maya said, cradling her phone against her shoulder while she adjusted a digital model on her computer. "Why?" "Because I'm flying to Boston tonight and I want to take you to dinner tomorrow, if you're free, if you want to." Maya nearly dropped her phone. "You're coming to Boston." "I have meetings Monday morning anyway," James said. "I moved them up. Say yes to dinner, Maya." She should have said no. She should have told him that flying to Boston to see someone he had met once was excessive and intense. But instead she found herself saying, "Yes, dinner, Saturday, perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. Text me your address." Maya spent all of Saturday in a state of nervous energy. She cleaned her apartment even though James would only see the entryway. She tried on 8 different outfits before settling on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that her roommate Emma said made her eyes look incredible. She did her makeup 3 times, kept her jewelry simple, and was ready by 6:30. James arrived exactly at 7, knocking softly. Maya opened the door and felt her breath catch. He wore dark jeans and a black button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, casual but still polished. He smiled when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You look good too," Maya managed. The restaurant James chose was in the North End, a small Italian place that looked unassuming from the outside, but was apparently impossible to get reservations at. Somehow, James had secured a corner table. They ordered wine and pasta and talked for 3 hours straight, conversation flowing as easily in person as it had over text. Maya told him about her presentation, how the clients had loved her ideas. James told her about his contractor dispute, now resolved. They debated the best buildings in Boston, discovered they both hated the same architectural trends, and argued good-naturedly about whether modern or classical design was superior. "You're a classicist at heart," James accused, pointing his fork at her. "I'm a pragmatist," Maya corrected. "I think good design borrows from everything and serves the people who use the space. Sometimes that's modern minimalism. Sometimes it's classical proportions. It depends." Spoken like a true architect, James said, but he was smiling. Over dessert, Maya asked the question that had been nagging at her all week. "Why did you really come to Boston? Be honest." James set down his espresso cup and met her eyes. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the wedding. Because texting wasn't enough. Because I wanted to see you again and life's too short to wait for the perfect moment." "Is that honest enough?" Maya's heart was racing. "That's pretty honest." "Your turn," James said. "Why did you say yes to dinner? You could have said no." "You should have said no to the crazy guy who flew across the country for a second date." "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you either," Maya admitted. "Because you asked me to dance when I felt invisible. Because you actually listen when I talk about my work. Because you're different from anyone I've ever met." "Different how?" You don't make me feel like I have to be smaller or quieter or less ambitious. You don't make me feel like my work is just a hobby or a phase. You look at me like I'm interesting exactly as I am." James reached across the table and took her hand. "That's because you are interesting exactly as you are." They walked along the harbor after dinner, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. It was cold, and James gave her his jacket without being asked. It smelled like him, and Maya pulled it tighter around her shoulders. They talked about everything and nothing, their breath making clouds in the chilly air. "I have to fly back to Chicago Monday afternoon," James said eventually, "but I'll be back in Boston in 2 weeks for those meetings." "Can I see you then?" "2 weeks is a long time," Maya said softly. "I know, but I'll call you, text you. Maybe we can video chat so I can see your face while we talk." "You're serious about this," Maya said. "About us, even though we just met." James stopped walking and turned to face her. "Maya, I've dated a lot of people. I've had relationships that made sense on paper but never felt like this. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I also know that I've never felt this way about someone after 2 conversations and a dinner. So yes, I'm serious. The question is whether you want to see where this goes." Maya looked up at him, at his honest eyes and serious expression. Everything logical said this was moving too fast, that long distance was impossible, that she didn't have time for a relationship. But standing there in his jacket with her hand in his, she couldn't remember why any of that mattered. "I want to see where this goes," she said. James kissed her then, soft and careful, asking permission even as he gave affection. Maya kissed him back, rising on her toes to meet him, and felt something click into place in her chest. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. The next 2 weeks crawled by. Maya threw herself into work, but every spare moment was filled with James. They video chatted every evening, learning each other's routines and habits. James always had coffee at his desk while they talked in the morning. Maya liked to curl up on her couch with tea in the evening. They watched the same movies simultaneously and talked through them. They sent each other photos of their days, building a catalog of ordinary moments. Maya's roommates noticed the change in her. "You're glowing," Emma said one morning. "This guy must be special." "He is," Maya admitted. "It's terrifying. Good terrifying or bad terrifying, I don't know yet." When James returned to Boston, he extended his stay through the weekend. They spent every moment together when Maya wasn't working. He took her sailing on a rental boat, and she was terrible at it but laughed the entire time. She showed him her favorite spots in the city, the hidden architectural gems tourists never saw. They had dinner at hole-in-the-wall restaurants and breakfast at fancy hotels, and kissed on street corners like teenagers. On Sunday morning, lying in her bed with sunlight streaming through the window, James traced patterns on her shoulder and said, "Come to Chicago. Next weekend. Let me show you my city." "I can't," Maya said automatically. "I have work. Take a day off, fly in Friday night, leave Sunday evening." "I want you to see where I live, meet my sister, see the building I told you about." Maya bit her lip. She never took days off, but she also couldn't remember the last time she had wanted something this much. "Okay," she said, "I'll come to Chicago." Chicago was everything James had promised and more. His apartment was a converted loft in a historic building he had restored himself, all exposed brick and massive windows and thoughtful design. Maya walked through it in awe, admiring every detail. "You designed this," she said. "I did," James confirmed. "It's my laboratory. Every project I work on, I test ideas here first. If I can make it work in my own space, I know it will work elsewhere." His sister Sarah came for dinner Saturday night. She was warm and funny and immediately suspicious of Maya in the protective way of younger siblings. But by the end of the evening, She was laughing at Maya's stories and texting her contact information. "I like you," Sarah said as she was leaving. "Don't hurt my brother. He pretends to be tough, but he's a marshmallow inside." "I heard that," James called from the kitchen. "You were supposed to," Sarah hugged Maya, "but seriously, he's happy. I haven't seen him this happy in years, so thank you for that." After Sarah left, James showed Maya the building he had told her about, the historic restoration that had been his first major success. It was beautiful, exactly as he described, full of life and light and community. They walked through the art space in the basement where a local theater group was rehearsing, and Maya felt something shift in her chest. "This is what I want to do," she said. "This exactly, creating spaces that matter." "Then do it," James said. "Start your practice, take the leap." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Money, experience, clients. 1,000 reasons." James was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "What if you had a client, a first project that could launch your portfolio?" Maya looked at him suspiciously. "What are you talking about?" "I'm acquiring a property in Boston. Old textile mill, needs complete renovation. I was going to hire a firm, but what if I hired you instead? You'd have complete creative control, a real budget, and a finished project you could showcase." "You can't just give me a project because we're dating," Maya said. "I'm not giving you anything. I'm hiring you because you're talented and your vision aligns with mine. I've seen your work, Maya. I've looked at your portfolio online. You're good. You just need someone to take a chance on you." James took her hands. "Let me be that someone, not as your boyfriend, as a developer who wants the best architect for his project." "This is crazy," Maya said, but she was smiling. "Is it? Or is it just the opportunity you've been waiting for?" Maya thought about her cramped apartment, and her 60-hour weeks, and her boss who never listened to her ideas. She thought about the textile mill transformed into something beautiful and functional. She thought about taking the leap she had been too scared to take. "I'll need a contract," she said. "A real one, market rates, nothing discounted because we're involved. Done. And if this doesn't work out between us, the project continues. No personal feelings affecting business. Agreed?" "Then yes," Maya said. "I'll take the project. I'll start my practice." James pulled her into his arms and kissed her. "You won't regret this." The next 3 months were a whirlwind. Maya gave notice at her firm and filed paperwork for her own practice. She worked with James on the textile mill project, spending hours on design concepts and budgets. They figured out how to balance their personal and professional relationship, keeping business meetings separate from date nights. It wasn't always easy. They argued about timelines and budgets and design choices. Maya pushed for more expensive materials. James worried about costs, but they learned to compromise, to trust each other's expertise. The project started to take shape, and Maya felt more alive than she had in years. Their relationship deepened too. James flew to Boston every other weekend, and Maya went to Chicago on the alternating weeks. They talked about their families, their fears, their dreams. Maya met James's father on a trip to Florida, a kind man who reminded her of her own dad. James came to dinner with Maya's parents and charmed them completely, asking her father detailed questions about his health and his recovery. "I like him," her father said after James left. "He's solid. He looks at you like you hung the moon." "It's still early," Maya said, but she was smiling. "Maybe," her mother said, "but I know what I see. That man loves you, sweetheart." Maya realized her mother was right one night in April when she and James were working late at the textile mill site. They were standing in what would eventually be the central atrium, surrounded by construction dust and evening shadows. James was explaining something about load-bearing walls when Maya just stopped listening and looked at him. He noticed immediately. "What?" "I love you," Maya said. The words came out simple and certain. James went very still. Then he crossed the space between them and cupped her face in his hands. "Say that again." "I love you," Maya repeated. "I'm in love with you. I know it's only been a few months, but I've never been more sure of anything." "I love you too," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've loved you since you caught that bouquet and looked annoyed about it. I've been waiting to tell you, wanting to get the timing right, but there is no right time except when you feel it." They kissed in the dusty construction site, hard hats forgotten, and Maya felt like every piece of her life was finally falling into place. The textile mill opened in August, and it was everything Maya had dreamed. The local press covered it extensively, praising the thoughtful design and community focus. Maya's phone started ringing with potential clients. Her practice was officially launched, and she was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. James threw her a celebration party at his Chicago loft, inviting Sarah and Maya's parents and all their friends. Catherine and Richard flew in from Hartford. Everyone toasted Maya's success, and she stood there feeling overwhelmed by how much her life had changed in less than a year. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Maya and James sat on his rooftop deck looking at the city lights. "I have something to ask you," James said. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I hope it's not." James took her hand. "Move to Chicago, move in with me, officially." Maya's breath caught. "That's a big step." "I know. But we're already doing this, Maya. We're already together, already planning our lives around each other. I'm tired of only seeing you every other weekend. I'm tired of saying goodbye. I want you here in my space, in my life every day." "But my practice is in Boston," Maya said. "All my projects, bring them with you or start fresh here. Chicago has no shortage of buildings that need your touch. I'll support you either way. I just want us to be in the same city." James squeezed her hand. "I love you. I want to build a life with you, not just steal weekends." Maya thought about her apartment in Boston with its bad lighting and noisy roommates. She thought about Chicago and its beautiful architecture, and James waiting for her every day. She thought about what her life could be if she was brave enough to reach for it. "Okay," she said. "I'll move to Chicago. I'll move in with you." James kissed her like she had given him the world. Moving was chaotic. Maya spent September packing up her Boston life and transferring her practice. She finished her outstanding projects and said goodbye to clients and friends. Emma cried when Maya moved out, making her promise to visit often. Catherine called 3 times a day to make sure Maya was sure about this, that she wasn't moving too fast. "I'm sure," Maya said every time. "Mom asked you to check on me, didn't she?" "Maybe," Catherine admitted. "But I worry too. This is huge, Maya." "I know, but it's right. He's right." By October, Maya was fully moved into James's loft, her architecture books mixing with his development portfolios, her terrible cooking balanced by his excellent skills. They fell into routines quickly, learning to share space and compromise on everything from thermostat settings to whose turn it was to buy groceries. Maya's practice grew steadily. She took on projects throughout Chicago, including 2 more of James's developments. She hired an assistant, then a junior architect. James's business continued thriving, and they became known in the Chicago development community as a formidable partnership. But it was the personal moments Maya treasured most: morning coffee on the rooftop deck, evening walks along the lake, lazy Sundays where they never left the apartment, James humming while he cooked dinner, Maya sketching at the kitchen table while James worked on his laptop nearby. The ordinary intimacy of building a life together. In December, Catherine announced she was pregnant. Maya flew to Hartford to help her with the nursery design, and James came along to help Richard with the actual construction. Watching James paint walls and assemble furniture, arguing good-naturedly with Richard about the best way to mount shelves. Maya felt a fierce wave of love and longing. She wanted this, not just the relationship, but the whole future. Marriage and maybe babies and decades of ordinary moments strung together into an extraordinary life. That night in their hotel room, Maya said, "Do you want kids?" James looked up from his book. "Is this a hypothetical question or a real one?" "Real," Maya said. "I'm watching Catherine prepare for this baby, and I'm realizing I want that someday. Maybe not right now, but someday. And I need to know if that's something you want too." James set his book aside and pulled Maya close. "I want everything with you. Kids, marriage, growing old together, the whole traditional package. I didn't know I wanted it until I met you, but now I can't imagine my life any other way." "Marriage," Maya repeated softly. "We haven't really talked about that." "We're talking about it now," James said. "I want to marry you, Maya. I've wanted to marry you since about month 3, but I was trying to be patient and not scare you off." Maya laughed, her eyes suspiciously damp. "You want to marry me, very much." James kissed her forehead. "But I'll wait until you're ready. No pressure. We have time." Except they didn't have as much time as Maya thought. On Valentine's Day, James took her to dinner at the same Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date in Boston. They had wine and pasta and talked about a new project Maya was excited about. Everything seemed perfectly normal until dessert arrived with a ring box sitting on top of the tiramisu. Maya stared at it, her heart pounding. "James, open it," he said softly. Inside was a vintage ring, Art Deco design with a central diamond and delicate metalwork. It was the most beautiful thing Maya had ever seen. James slid out of his chair and knelt beside the table, taking her hand. "Maya, I know we said we had time, but I don't want to wait anymore. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. You've changed my entire life, made me better, made me happier. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me. Will you marry me?" Maya was crying, not even trying to hide it. "Yes. Yes. Of course, yes." James slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. He stood and pulled her into his arms and the whole restaurant applauded. Maya didn't care. She just held onto James and felt like her heart might burst from joy. They got married in September, exactly 2 years after they met at Catherine's wedding. The ceremony was at the same hotel, the Grand Hartford, because Maya insisted it was where their story started. They kept it small, just family and close friends, and Maya wore a simple, elegant dress that James cried when he saw. Catherine was her matron of honor, 6 months postpartum and glowing. Sarah stood on James's side as his best woman. Their fathers walked them both down the aisle since James's mother couldn't be there. Maya's mother sobbed through the entire ceremony, and even James's stoic father wiped his eyes. The reception was everything Maya had wanted, full of love and laughter and dancing. But her favorite moment came early in the evening when James led her onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. They moved together to the same song that had been playing when he first asked her to dance 2 years ago. "Remember this," James murmured against her hair. "I remember everything," Maya said. "I remember thinking I was invisible and then you saw me." "I'll always see you," James promised. "For the rest of our lives, I'll always see you." They danced alone for a moment before others joined them, but Maya barely noticed. She was too busy looking at her husband, this man who had changed her entire world by quietly asking to dance with her when she needed it most. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm after the wedding. Maya's practice flourished, becoming known for thoughtful, affordable housing and community spaces. James's company grew too, and they occasionally collaborated on projects that married their shared values of good design and community impact. 2 years into their marriage, Maya discovered she was pregnant. She told James over breakfast on a random Tuesday, just handed him the positive test while he was drinking coffee. He stared at it for a solid 30 seconds before picking her up and spinning her around the kitchen, both of them laughing and crying. Their daughter Emma was born in March, named after Maya's favorite roommate. She had James's dark hair and Maya's eyes, and from day one, she had both of them completely wrapped around her tiny fingers. James was a natural father, getting up for midnight feedings and changing diapers without complaint. Maya watched him rock Emma to sleep and fell in love with him all over again. Catherine's son was 18 months old by then, and the cousins became inseparable despite the age gap. Family gatherings grew louder and messier and infinitely more precious. Maya's father's cancer remained in remission, and he spent hours on the floor playing with Emma, making her giggle with silly faces. When Emma was 2, they started talking about another baby. Maya wanted siblings close together, remembering her own relationship with Catherine. James just wanted whatever Maya wanted. Their son Noah arrived when Emma was 3, completing their family in a way Maya hadn't known was possible. The years blurred together in the best way. School plays and birthday parties and family vacations. Late nights working on projects while the kids slept. Teaching Emma and Noah about architecture and taking them to job sites. Weekend sailing trips where Noah inevitably got seasick and Emma fearlessly climbed everything. James's business continued succeeding, but he started stepping back from day-to-day operations, training managers to take over while he focused on family. Maya did the same, taking on fewer projects but making each one count. They talked often about how lucky they were, about how different their lives could have been if James hadn't asked Maya to dance that night. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James surprised Maya with a trip back to the Grand Hartford Hotel. They had dinner in the same ballroom where Catherine's reception had been, dancing in the spot where they first met. "You ever regret it?" Maya asked, moving so fast, diving in so completely. "Never," James said firmly. "Not for a single second." "You?" "Never," Maya echoed. "You saved me that night, you know. I was so lost and you saw me." "We saved each other," James corrected. "I was just going through the motions before I met you. You reminded me what it felt like to be alive." They danced until the hotel staff gently suggested they leave. And then they went upstairs to their room and made love like newlyweds, still discovering each other after a decade together. Maya's practice eventually grew into a firm employing 15 architects, all focused on accessible design and community impact. She won awards and gave lectures and became known in her field. But her proudest moments were always the project openings, where she watched families move into beautiful, affordable homes or communities, gathering in spaces she had created. James's company became one of the most respected development firms in the Midwest, known for ethical practices and sustainable design. He served on boards and mentored young developers and used his success to create opportunities for others. But he always made time for dinner with his family, for soccer games and dance recitals and homework help. Emma grew up creative and confident, eventually studying architecture like her mother. Noah was more interested in building than designing, working construction jobs through high school, and talking about becoming a contractor like his grandfather. Maya and James supported both paths equally, proud of the people their children were becoming. Catherine and Richard stayed close, visiting often and hosting holidays. Sarah married a kind man who taught high school English and gave James and Maya 2 more nieces to spoil. Maya's parents eventually moved closer to Chicago, buying a condo downtown so they could see the grandchildren more often. On Maya's 50th birthday, her family threw her a surprise party. Emma had flown in from New York where she was working at a prestigious firm. Noah drove up from the construction site where he was project managing a large commercial build. Catherine and Richard came with their 3 kids, now all teenagers. Sarah's family filled out the crowd, along with friends and colleagues and clients who had become family. Maya stood in her own home, the converted warehouse she and James had purchased and renovated together 10 years earlier, surrounded by everyone she loved. James came up beside her and put his arm around her waist. "Happy birthday, love. Thank you for this," Maya said. "For all of this. The party, the life, everything. Thank you for saying yes when a stranger asked you to dance," James replied. Maya leaned into him, watching Emma show Noah something on her phone while Catherine tried to wrangle her teenagers. She thought about the woman she had been at 27, standing alone at a wedding feeling invisible and lost. She thought about how one moment of courage, one acceptance of an offered hand had changed everything. "Best decision I ever made," she said. "Mine too," James agreed. They stood together in the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, and Maya felt nothing but gratitude for the stranger who had seen her when she needed it most, and the love story that had unfolded from a single dance. Years continued to pass in the way time does when life is full and happy. Maya and James grew older together, their hair graying but their love only deepening. They became grandparents when Emma had twins, a boy and a girl, and then again when Noah's wife gave birth to a daughter. They watched their children navigate careers and relationships, offering advice when asked and support always. The textile mill project that launched Maya's career was eventually designated a historic landmark. She and James attended the ceremony together, holding hands while a plaque was unveiled crediting her design vision and his development commitment. It felt like coming full circle, honoring the beginning of everything they had built together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in a small ceremony at the same church where they had married. Emma and Noah stood with them, and the grandchildren scattered flower petals. Catherine cried just as much as she had at the original wedding. Maya wore a new dress but the same vintage ring, and James wore the watch Emma and Noah had given him on his 60th birthday. 30 years, James said in his vows, and I would do it all again exactly the same way. Every challenge, every change, every ordinary moment. Because they were all with you, and that's made every one precious. Maya's vows were simpler. You asked me to dance when I felt alone, and you've been my partner ever since. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this extraordinary life. They kissed while their family applauded, and Maya thought about the woman she had been, dancing alone by the windows at her sister's reception. She had felt invisible then, lost in the shadow of Catherine's happiness. But she hadn't been invisible. James had seen her, had recognized something worth knowing, and had been brave enough to approach her quietly when she needed it most. That one moment of courage, his and hers, had created everything that followed. Their love story hadn't been dramatic or complicated. It had been 2 people choosing each other, over and over, through all the ordinary days and extraordinary moments that made up a life together. And standing there at 60, surrounded by the family they had built and the love they had nurtured, Maya knew she wouldn't change a single thing. She had danced alone once, but she would never be alone again. She had found her partner, her love, her home in James, and that was more than she had ever dreamed possible. The reception after the vow renewal was casual and joyful, held in the garden of the home Maya and James would eventually pass to their children. There was music and dancing and too much food, and as the sun started to set, James took Maya's hand and led her to a quiet corner of the garden. "Remember when I told you I'd remember dancing with you," he said. "I remember. I was right. That memory is still crystal clear. You in that burgundy dress, looking so sad and so beautiful. The way you moved when you thought no one was watching. How your face changed when you said yes to dancing with me." Maya smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "I remember, too, how kind your eyes were, how you didn't make me feel foolish or dramatic, how right it felt to dance with you even though we had just met." "Dance with me now," James said. "One more time." So they danced in their garden, surrounded by roses and evening light and the laughter of their family nearby. They moved together with the ease of 3 decades of partnership, knowing each other's rhythms as well as their own. And when the music ended and the party continued without them for a few more stolen moments, they just held each other and swayed gently, still dancing even in the silence. "I love you," Maya whispered. "I love you too," James replied. "Always have, always will." And that was their story, beginning to end and all the beautiful moments in between. A love story that started with a quiet question at a wedding reception and built into a lifetime of joy and partnership and profound, enduring love. They had danced alone once, but they had danced together ever since, and they would keep dancing together until the music finally stopped for good. But that was still many years away. For now, there was just the garden and the twilight and the man she loved holding her close, and Maya had never felt more grateful, more blessed, or more perfectly, completely home.